In the spring of 1804, France stood at the crossroads. Napoleon Bonaparte faced growing threats from both within and beyond his borders. Royalist conspiracies, foreign spies, and whispers of assassination filled the air. A nobleman living in exile across the Rhine suddenly found himself at the center of it all. He was about to be taken, dragged from his home in the dead of night. His fate, sealed not in a courtroom but in the halls of power, would become one of the most controversial moments of Napoleon's reign. Post-revolutionary France was a nation in chaos, scarred by the fall of the monarchy, the reign of terror, and years of instability. Napoleon's quick rise to power provided much-needed order and direction. Following the coup on 9th of November in 1799, Napoleon became first consul and in 1802 was declared consul for life. Napoleon's legal reforms, such as the Napoleonic Code and his military successes, helped solidify his grip on power. But his centralization of authority alienated many who had fought for the revolution. As Napoleon sought to reshape Europe through conquest and governance, his rise to power provoked growing opposition from various factions within France and abroad. In a bid to heal the divisions within France, Napoleon offered amnesty to émigrés, aristocrats who had fled during the revolution. Over 40,000 nobles returned to France, many of whom were granted positions in the new government and military. Napoleon and Josephine even personally loaned money to help several returning nobles to re-establish themselves. Despite these gestures, many of the returning émigrés quickly turned against Napoleon, viewing him as an illegitimate ruler. They began conspiring to overthrow him. Assassination attempts became a recurring threat, including the infamous Infernal Machine plot on Christmas Eve 1800. A cart loaded with explosives detonated as Napoleon's carriage passed through, narrowly missing him but killing several bystanders. This event underscored the persistent danger posed by the Royalist conspiracies. Opposition to Napoleon's rule grew even within the military ranks. To soldiers who had risen through the revolutionary ranks, Napoleon's ambition seemed like a betrayal of the Republic. His ascension to the consulship for life was viewed as the death of revolutionary ideals. Similarly, Royalists saw him as the ultimate obstacle to the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy. In this volatile political environment, conspiracies flourished, driven by grievances on all sides. The assassination attempts underscored Napoleon's precarious position and deepened his paranoia about internal threats. This fueled an intensified crackdown on political dissent and heightened surveillance of potential enemies both within and outside France. One of the most prominent threats to Napoleon came in the form of the Caududal plot, led by Georges Caududal, a royalist leader from Brittany. His objective was clear: assassinate Napoleon and pave the way for the monarchy's return. This plot, which involved émigré agents and British support, epitomized the pervasive fear of royalist conspiracies within Napoleon's regime. Georges Caududal and his followers slipped into France from Britain in the end of August 1803 aboard a lone British frigate. In Normandy, near the commune of Belleville, under the cover of darkness, the 8 men landed. General Charles Pichegru, another key player in the plot, was also residing in England and arrived in France on 16th of January 1804. The discharged general turned royalist had been exiled during the coup in 1797. While royalist conspiracies garnered significant attention, opposition also emerged from within Napoleon's own ranks. Military officers increasingly viewed him as a usurper. One notable incident involved a colonel of hussars who, during a drunken gathering, declared his intention to assassinate Napoleon at a military review. Although this plot was quickly uncovered and suppressed, and even hidden from Napoleon by Minister of Police Joseph Fouché, it reflected a deepening dissatisfaction among the military. As Caududal and Pichegru infiltrated France, remarkably they reached Paris undetected by Fouché's police. Their plan mirrored Napoleon's own rise: kill him, then seize control of the army. For that, they needed a military figure with a reputation to rival Napoleon's. Only one man fit the role, General Jean Moreau. They managed to initiate contact with General Moreau on the 28th of January 1804. General Moreau, one of France's most celebrated military leaders, became a focal point for opposition to Napoleon. He not only became part of the Bourbon conspiracies, but rather the head of the disaffected parties of France. All parties who disliked Napoleon tried to influence him and win him to their cause. Moreau initially supported Napoleon during the coup of 18 Brumaire. However, their relationship soured over time as Moreau grew disillusioned with Napoleon's unrelenting ambition, despite Napoleon's attempts to win him over through gifts and honors. He was a man with personal abilities the Royalists found perfect for the role. He met with Pichegru twice. Once in the presence of Caududal, Moreau insisted that without Napoleon's death, the army would not follow him. If Napoleon were eliminated, he would be the natural choice to take command. They planned for Moreau to become the first consul, with Pichegru as second consul. Caududal, furious at their personal ambitions, demanded a role, insisting he should at least be third consul. But their plans were not unobserved. Joseph Fouché, Minister of Police for the French Republic, was a cunning and crafty man. He always tended to know which way the wind was blowing, which side had the best chance of taking power. Nothing had changed this time. He had infiltrated anti-Napoleonic circles in both Paris and London. He knew of the Royalists' arrival in 1803, but not their whereabouts. However, once in Paris, they were soon under Fouché's surveillance. Fouché informed his police that the Royalists had entered Paris and sprung into action, but they knew not where to begin and had a difficult time apprehending them. They managed to gather that there was a conspiracy and plans to assassinate Napoleon, and that Moreau had been in communications with them. They even managed to get the locations of several safe houses in Paris where leaders might be hiding. On the 29th of January 1804, French authorities arrested a British agent who, under interrogation, exposed details of the plot. On February the 8th, Caududal's servant was arrested and tortured, revealing further information. Shortly after, 2 more conspirators were captured and subjected to torture, revealing that the plot was to commence upon the arrival of the Bourbon prince in France. Armed with this intelligence, Fouché briefed Napoleon, who was stunned to hear of Moreau's involvement, exclaiming, "What? Moreau in such a plot?" He responded by tightening security in Paris. General Murat ordered the gates to the city to be closed each night from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sentries were stationed all around the city walls, each within sight of the next, supported by detachments of cavalry from the consular guard. The Seine was guarded by boats. All vehicles were searched, and anyone without proper papers was detained. Homes of known royalists were raided, the jury system suspended, and security at the Tuileries reinforced. On February the 15th, Moreau was arrested. The next day, the governor of Paris, on Murat's orders, publicly declared Moreau's involvement with the Bourbons conspiracy. The police pursued the remaining conspirators relentlessly. Through the work of the police and Fouché, almost all of the conspirators were arrested. A friend of Pichegru, bribed by the authorities, revealed his hiding place. On the 28th of February, the police stormed his room. They first managed to secure the weapons next to him, and then, after a struggle, they managed to restrain him. Caududal was arrested by the police after a wild carriage chase through Paris. He managed to kill one of the policemen and mortally wounded another, and almost escaped. It took several men to secure his arrest. In total, 40 persons were arrested. They were both low-born and part of the Ancien regime. The interrogations and confiscated documents reveal that the plot's final phase awaited the arrival of a Bourbon prince, who was meant to lead the military invasion and oversee the monarchy's restoration. This led to a critical question: who was this Bourbon prince? Fouché and Talleyrand debated possible candidates, but they quickly disregarded the Duke of Provence, later Louis XVIII. He was 48 years old, weak and sick, not capable of entering France and leading an uprising. Was it the Duke of Artois, the brother of Louis XVI? He was now 46 years old. He was also disregarded. He didn't fit the role, considered too cowardly. Talleyrand and Fouché then agreed that the only option left was the Duke of Enghien, Louis Antoine Henri de Bourbon, the last prince of Condé. The Duke of Enghien was a member of the House of Condé, a branch of the Bourbon dynasty. The young duke, known for his bravery and high-minded ideals, hoped to position himself to lead royalist efforts against the Republic should an opportunity arise. The Duke fled France in 1789 at 15, accompanying his family after the storming of the Bastille. Committed to the Bourbon cause, he served with distinction in the Austrian army. Though he failed to join the British army, he secured a stipend from Britain to sustain his exile. By the early 1800s, the Duke had settled in Baden, living in relative seclusion at Ettenheim. His life there seemed uneventful at first glance, marked by hunting and private correspondence. However, French intelligence had been keeping a close watch on him. Reports indicated that he had crossed into Strasbourg on several occasions, meeting with royalist sympathizers and émigrés. He was also suspected of having connections with General Moreau and the conspirators tied to Pichegru, though his precise role in these plots remained unclear. His name had surfaced in previous royalist conspiracies. In 1799, during internal unrest in France, rumors claimed he had secretly entered Paris to lead a royalist uprising. Though this proved false, it underscored his symbolic importance to the Bourbon cause. Both Fouché and Talleyrand asked why the Duke chose to live so close to the border. The usual explanation is that he wished to live there with his wife, but his close proximity to the French border raised suspicion. Fouché presented letters where the Duke allegedly sought to suborn French troops along the Rhine. By the 10th of March in 1804, Napoleon, Talleyrand and Fouché and other ministers had received detailed reports from agents who had been stationed in Baden to monitor the Duke. These reports described frequent interactions with other counter-revolutionaries and émigrés in Germany, as well as aborted plans to travel to England to coordinate with other conspirators. Napoleon was convinced that the Duke posed a significant threat to the stability of his regime. Napoleon then issued orders to act decisively. A decision was made to send a force into Baden and arrest the Duke on neutral ground. Several ministers objected, warning against an obsession with the Bourbons, but they were met with Napoleon's fury. On March 10th and 11th, Talleyrand sent notes to the Baden minister in Paris, informing him that French troops would enter Baden to seize the Duke. On March 14th, 1804, a contingent of French soldiers, 300 dragoons, and around 700 infantry, acting under the direction of Caulaincourt, entered the territory of Baden under cover of night. France was at peace with Baden, yet the force crossed the Rhine at Rhine on pontoons and rode via Auldorf to Ettenheim. At 5:30 a.m., the French force reached the Duke's residence in Ettenheim and surrounded it. The Duke, warned by his servants, immediately prepared for a fight, but was restrained by one of his attendants, who insisted that the attacking force was too great to resist. The soldiers stormed the house and entered the Duke's apartment, presenting their weapons and demanding to know which of the men was the Duke. The Duke calmly responded, "If you desire to arrest him, you ought to have his description in your warrant." The soldiers replied that they would seize them all, which they promptly did. They quickly gathered every letter, document and item from the Duke's office. Taking 2.3 million francs from his safe, they also took his dog. The entire household was arrested and taken to a nearby mill, where they were permitted to dress. At some point, the French identified the Duke among the group and separated him, along with his attendants, and placing them in wagons and transporting them to the citadel of Strasbourg on the 16th of March. There, the Duke was further isolated, except for his personal aide-de-camp. Cut off from the outside world, the Duke was forbidden any communication and remained so for 3 days. In the early hours of 18th of March, between 1 and 2 a.m., he was abruptly ordered to dress and was informed that he would begin a journey. He requested that a servant from his household accompany him, but his captors denied the request, saying it was unnecessary. Transported in utmost secrecy, the Duke traveled under the name Plessis and arrived in Paris on the 20th of March. He was first placed in the temple, where Marie Antoinette had once been imprisoned. But after a few hours, he was moved to the Château de Vincennes outside Paris. There, he remained throughout the day. Around midnight, he was awakened and taken for interrogation. Witnesses later reported that throughout his ordeal, the Duke displayed remarkable composure, carrying himself with dignity befitting his rank. Meanwhile, the documents seized from his office were taken to the Tuileries and presented to Napoleon personally. Napoleon placed Murat in command of the Duke's trial, a role Murat resented, and he declared, "Bonaparte is trying to bespatter my coat, but he will not succeed." A heated confrontation followed, ending with Napoleon dismissing him, saying, "If you don't carry out my orders, I'll send you back to your mountains in Quercy." Murat appointed Chief of Police Savary to guard the Duke at Vincennes and ensure the judgment was swiftly executed. The Duke, considered a French citizen, was subjected to trial before a French military court. On March the 20th, a public resolution declared the charges against him, and he was officially brought before the tribunal. At Vincennes, the Duke was interrogated under Murat's orders. The official protocol describes him as 170 centimeters tall, with chestnut hair, grey-brown eyes, an oval face, and a crooked nose. During questioning, he confirmed his name, rank, and service in the French emigrant army under his grandfather, the Prince of Condé. He recounted his exile, listing countries he had lived in and explaining that he had resided in Ettenheim for 2 years with the Elector of Baden's permission, who offered him hunting privileges and other activities. He insisted that, as a Bourbon, it was his duty to restore his family to the French throne. When asked if he had done anything other than strive toward the goal, he replied that his bloodline compelled him to do so. Regarding England, he denied ever visiting or receiving British government support, except for a pension of 4,200 guineas, which he claimed was solely for his livelihood, not to act against France. The interrogators attempted to implicate him in the conspiracy of Caudodal, Pichegru, and Moreau. When asked about General Pichegru, he firmly denied knowing him, stating, "I do not know him. I have never, I believe, seen him. I have no conversation with him. I am glad I have not been acquainted with him, if the story is true regarding the vile means he proposed." The Duke admitted corresponding with his grandfather and father, but denied seeing them for years. He acknowledged writing to friends in France, but only on personal matters. Twice, he requested an audience with Napoleon, believing his name, rank, and circumstances would persuade the first consul to grant it. His request was ignored. During his second interrogation, in the presence of the military commission, the Duke reiterated his previous statements, adding only that he was prepared to renew the war and take service in approaching hostilities between England and France. On the night of March the 20th to 21st, the Duke, already sleep-deprived, was abruptly awakened in the middle of the night and was placed before a hastily assembled military court on the orders of Marshal Murat. The court, led by General Hulin and composed of 8 officers, lacked the legal authority to try or sentence him. The Duke had no legal defender, no witnesses, and no opportunity to appeal his sentence, despite French law requiring a defense counsel. The court-martial took place in the chateau's great hall with questions prepared by Napoleon. The Duke faced 6 charges. 1. He had borne arms against France. 2. He had offered his services to enemy of France. 3. He had received, encouraged, and paid for spies that worked against French security. 4. He had been the leader of Frenchmen who emigrated from France and gathered at the French border to attack France. 5. He had created and operated a spy organization from Strasbourg with the intention to create an uprising in British interests. 6. And lastly, took part in a conspiracy against the First Consul's life. The commission received no substantial evidence, neither oral nor written, yet was expected to justify a predetermined verdict: execution. The sole evidence was a police report claiming he hosted emigres and vanished for days, explained as aiding compatriots or hunting in the Black Forest. Other reports were vague and unsubstantiated. His own admissions revealed no crimes. The Duke acknowledged taking up arms against France and being ready to do so again, not as a conspirator, but as a soldier reclaiming his family's rights. By law, this did not warrant death. Capital punishment applied only to emigres caught within French borders or hostile territories, neither of which applied to him. His pension from Britain was an act of charity, not military pay, and mere intent to enlist in the English army was not a punishable offense. Throughout the interrogation, he answered plainly and with courage. French legal procedures required his responses to be reviewed with him for corrections. This was not done. Despite the prosecution's efforts, some judges hesitated, moved by his noble bearing. The Duke remained resolute, insisting he acted only in defense of his family's rights. A Condé, he declared, could never enter France save with arms in his hands. My birth and my beliefs make me inflexible on this point. His steadfastness unsettled the judges. 10 times, Enghien later admitted, we gave him the chance to retract, but he remained immovable. Yet Chief of Police Savary, overseeing the trial, ensured all played their part in delivering the expected verdict. The judges of the military commission faced a dilemma, aligning their verdict with both the evidence and accusations against the Duke. Despite contradictions, they found him guilty on all counts and sentenced him to death. The verdict stated, every conspiracy aimed at harming the state through civil war or by arming citizens against each other or against the lawful authority shall be punished by death. The court failed to cite a specific applicable law, but nonetheless ordered immediate execution, bypassing standard appeals or clemency procedures. General Enghien attempted to delay finalizing the sentence to influence Napoleon, but Savary intervened, declaring, Messieurs, your business is over, mine begins. Enghien maintained that the court was not responsible for the hasty execution. The law required copies of the sentence to be sent to officials before any execution, and these copies were incomplete. We intended to appeal to Napoleon. However, Savary's actions cut short any chance of intervention. If he acted without orders, the responsibility lies with him. If he acted on orders, the court was deliberately kept in the dark. The Duke was denied a confessor, receiving only insults in response to his requests. Resolute, he knelt and prayed in solitude. In the early hours of March the 21st, the condemned Duke was led from the Château de Vincennes to the moat outside its walls for execution. Accounts differ slightly on the exact time, with some citing 3 a.m. and others 6 a.m. On the way to his death, he calmly conversed with the soldiers escorting him. Upon reaching the designated spot, a grave had already been prepared. Nearby stood a detachment of elite French soldiers, their presence commanded by the police chief, who remained on hand to oversee the proceedings. The atmosphere was heavy and foreboding. Though dawn had broken, a thick mist lingered over the ground. Torches were lit, their pale, flickering light blending with the faint glow of morning, creating a somber and ominous scene. The Duke was positioned before the firing squad. The order to fire was given by the future Duke de Rovigo. The soldiers discharged their weapons, and the Duke fell. Witnesses recounted that he faced his fate with composure and dignity until the very end. In death, however, he was denied the honors befitting his rank. His body was unceremoniously thrown into the open grave, treated with the same disregard as one might show to common criminals like robbers or murderers. The execution of the Duke remains a chilling reminder of the ruthless nature of this act, where the lines between justice and brutality were utterly erased. In the 2 months following the Duke's execution, others accused of conspiring against Napoleon were brought to trial. Many were sentenced to death, while General Moreau was imprisoned. However, he managed to escape and fled to North America. Several aristocrats implicated in the conspiracy were arrested, but later pardoned by Napoleon. Not long after, other conspirators either died mysteriously in their cells or were executed. The death of General Pichegru was under suspicious circumstances in Parisian prisons. He was found strangled with a handkerchief in a way that cast doubt on the official claim of suicide, as his injuries suggested external force. Many saw these deaths as convenient for Napoleon, eliminating individuals who could implicate him or undermine his position. Napoleon Bonaparte's defense for the execution of the Duke, while in exile at St. Helena, involved shifting blame to his ministers, notably Talleyrand. He claimed that the decision was sprung on him during a casual moment with coffee, where he was briefed about a Bourbon conspiracy, leading to the suggestion of executing the Duke to deter further plots. Napoleon insisted he was unaware of the Duke's identity and proximity, suggesting his ministers had orchestrated everything, presenting him with orders he signed hastily. He further accused Talleyrand of suppressing a loyalty appeal from the Duke, which could have saved his life, though no evidence of such a letter exists. Critics argue this defense lacks credibility. Talleyrand had no clear motive to push for the Duke's death, and it's unlikely Napoleon would be so easily manipulated in significant state matters. The ultimate responsibility for the decision clearly lay with Napoleon, not his advisors. Napoleon's varied justifications included claims that the execution was legally sound, necessary for self-defense, or a matter of state policy. These arguments fail under scrutiny, especially since the Duke was abducted from neutral Baden, violating international law. Critics label his self-defense argument as a tyrant's plea, noting the lack of evidence linking the Duke to any plot, thus branding the execution as murder. Napoleon's actions also reflected his ambition to establish a hereditary empire in France. He argued that as the embodiment of the revolution, he was essential to prevent France's descent into chaos and a Bourbon restoration. Despite the weak argument, his popularity ensured legislative support, leading to his proclamation as Emperor of the French Republic on May 2, 1804, and the official establishment of the First French Empire on May 18th. Carl Dudal's quip from prison, "We have done more than we hoped to do. We meant to give France a king, but we have given her an emperor," ironically highlighted the unintended consequence of their actions. The execution provoked outrage across Europe. Baden's government quickly protested the violation of its sovereignty, and the news of the event sparked condemnation from other nations. Gustav IV Adolf of Sweden, whose wife was a princess of Baden, voiced his anger loudly. A close friend of the Duke, he inherited the Duke's dog and a hunting rifle after his death. The Russian court entered a period of mourning for the Duke and sent letters of protest to Paris and to the imperial diet of the Holy Roman Empire. This put the German states into somewhat of a bind. While they did not want to risk antagonizing France by agreeing with the Tsar's protest, neither could they afford to ignore it and risk offending Russia. In the end, the Duke of Baden announced that Bonaparte had given a satisfactory explanation for the violation of Baden's sovereignty, putting an end to the matter. In Britain, Napoleon's actions fueled anti-French sentiment, leading to William Pitt's return as Prime Minister and the assembly of another coalition against France. Prussia and Austria remained silent, while Spain voiced approval. Within France, reactions were muted due to the normalization of executions after the years of revolutionary turmoil. Newspapers declared the Duke guilty of conspiring against the state, with many applauding his death as necessary for national security. Napoleon's wife, Josephine, and his mother were reportedly among the few within his inner circle deeply upset by the event. Among France's new elite, the execution signaled that the Bourbon royal family was permanently excluded from French politics. Even within Napoleon's circle, reactions were subdued. Figures like Fouché remained unmoved. After Napoleon's fall, the Bourbon family investigated the Duke's death, with various officials deflecting blame. Some believe Talleyrand and Fouché used the execution to entangle Napoleon in their schemes, while others see them as mere accomplices. Modern views suggest we might never fully understand their roles, but they share some guilt. A letter from Talleyrand dated just before the Duke's arrest hints at his encouragement for Napoleon to act decisively against enemies. The execution was widely seen as a political blunder, condemned as a violation of international law. Fouché famously remarked, "It was worse than a crime, it was a mistake." This single act became a symbol of Napoleon's ruthlessness, casting a long shadow over his legacy. In his will, Napoleon wrote, "I caused the Duke of Enghien to be arrested and judged because it was necessary for the safety, interest, and the honor of the French people when the Comte d'Artois, by his own confession, was supporting 60 assassins in Paris. In similar circumstances, I would act in the same way again." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated on our latest uploads.